Okay, we're going live. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome. We'll kick off in a minute or so, just as people join. Got 45 people joined so far. Welcome. Do say hello in the chat room. There's usually a noisy banter going on in the background. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're going to kick off in a minute or so, just as people join. We're up to about, 75 people now. Say hello. Do say hello in the chat room. It usually gets quite lively. People still coming in. We'll get going once once it settles down a little bit. Thanks for joining. Okay, I'm going to kick off. My name's Stephen Waddington. I want to welcome you to the April, I'm getting ahead of myself, April edition of WaddsCon. We've got a great lineup today. You can see them here in front of you. Alex is going to kick off. Alex and Reuben Sinclair is going to kick off and talk about the current state of the recruitment market, how to get a job and how to get ahead. Beth is joining us from North to talk about creativity, particularly on a deadline and some of the challenges we've faced working through COVID-19 in the creative industries. Sophie Drake is here from Story. She's going to tell us her own story, talk to us about storytelling and using stories to create human connection. And David Gallagher joins us from Omnicom. He's got a new book out, Truth Be Told. He's going to talk about purpose and authentic marketing. I want to thank everyone that's bought a ticket today and donated to the Bay Food Bank. We've raised 500 quid and provided a 3-day shop for 10 families. I really appreciate that. It's a local food bank close to my heart. Format today is really straightforward. If you've been before, you'll know. Each of the speakers will talk for 5 minutes or so, and then we'll be followed by a Q&A. We encourage banter, comments and questions in the chat. After each individual has spoken, I'll pull out some of the questions and talk to each of the speakers. Without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to invite Alex to join me on the stage from Reuben Sinclair and talk to us about the job market. Alex, hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Do you want to share your deck?
I will, yeah. Can you see me and my deck? All good?
Yeah, go for it.
Fab, cool. Thank you very much for having me. So as Stephen said, I'm here to speak about the current job market because it has changed quite significantly in the last year. I think this time last year, unfortunately, there just weren't many companies hiring at the moment, and there were unfortunately a lot of people out of work due to redundancies and furloughs. But now it's a completely different story, and my message is ultimately that candidates in the PR industry are really wanted. They're really valuable at the moment. A lot of companies are hiring, and so there's a huge opportunity for people that are willing to take what is a perceived risk of moving jobs at the moment. And I wanted to talk through how to best seize that opportunity, strike while the iron's hot. And also, if you are hiring, maybe there's a few kind of things to note in here as well from the candidate's perspective. So rattle through these, but the first thing is really knowing what you want and what you don't want. So as a candidate in the PR industry at the moment, you have probably got the opportunity to be relatively picky. So it really helps to try and narrow and focus the search as much as possible by understanding and really drilling down into what you want. And if you don't really know that, definitely kind of working out what you don't want. What I would suggest is probably having a kind of top 3 in terms of criteria of things that you want. And then beyond that, it's worth keeping an open mind, because you never know what might get uncovered throughout your kind of search. It is kind of worth keeping an open mind, but keeping the top 3 components in mind at all times. Once you have kind of decided where you want to go, you can then use that information to evaluate your skill set against that, and then upskill where you're lacking. There is an opportunity in the market at the moment to potentially make a little bit of a career change, because good candidates are hard to come by. Companies are looking at sort of outside of their usual spectrum. So there's an opportunity to kind of move into a slightly different area, but it might be worthwhile kind of upskilling in those areas to show kind of your genuine interest in those areas, but also to show that proactivity that you're willing to undergo training. From a flip side, if you're an employer and you are looking to hire, if you're not already looking outside the industry or looking at alternative skill sets, I would really, really encourage you to do so. The great thing about the PR industry is a lot of the core skills that you need to be a great PR are trainable and teachable. But the kind of attitudes and behaviors that you need to be a great employee, they're not trainable. You've either got them or you don't. So when you're hiring, it's really, really important to hire based on those kind of attitudes and behaviors, and understand that you can upskill in the areas beyond that. And yeah, if you're a candidate and you are kind of sort of lacking in sort of certain skills, then there's definitely the opportunity to kind of upskill and kind of go into new areas. The third kind of point is around PR, and you guys know this far better than I do, but I think it's something that's neglected when we're talking about ourselves or our businesses. We're very, very good at PRing our clients or our company if we're working in-house in an in-house PR team, but people forget to do it for yourself. So the best way to get found if you're job hunting is to PR yourself. So using LinkedIn channels and interacting with people within your industry, posting blog posts, using social media, that's a great way to kind of get yourself out there and get yourself noticed as a thought leader within the industry sector that you're kind of wanting to go into. On the flip side, if you're looking to hire, it's really important that you kind of work on your own employer brand as well. So again, that's something that gets neglected quite often. The best way to attract the best talent is to put yourself out there and talk about your employee value proposition. So what can you offer employees that perhaps your competitors can't? The fourth point is about doing your due diligence as both an employer and a candidate, I suppose, but particularly as a candidate at the moment. Like I said, you kind of have the powers in your hands at the moment. So when you're doing an interview process, it's really important to make sure you do your due diligence, and that's both in terms of your research, so definitely researching company, but also when you're in an interview process, making sure you ask lots of questions. It is a two-way process. Employers should be aware that you are going to ask lots of questions and you are going to do your due diligence, because you may have more than one opportunity on the go, and you need to find out as much as you possibly can in order to make your decisions. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to grill an interviewer as much as they are grilling you. And equally, if you are doing the interviewing, be prepared for questions and know how to sell an opportunity at your business. And then the final thing is about us as recruiters. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't mention us, but there's a big kind of misconception that we are here just to kind of make money and to count our pennies like this chap is doing in the right-hand corner. Whilst we are a business and ultimately we do have to be profitable, we are also a really good source of insight and knowledge within the market. So definitely do pick our brains, use us as much as you possibly can. We might have some really good insights for you that will help in terms of your decision making when kind of finding new jobs. We might not necessarily be able to get you a candidate right now, or we might not be able to necessarily find you a job right now, but we'll definitely help wherever we can, and we'll tell you and be quite honest about the market and give you some hints and tips. So I guess on that note, do feel free to pick my brains and get in touch. But like I say, please don't abuse the trust. We are genuinely quite nice people, and yeah, there's a two-way street. And that, I think I've rattled through it. That is over to you guys for any questions.
Thank you very much, Alex.
Speedy.
Really great session. Yeah, great pace. Thank you. First question from me. Are there any particular areas in the market that are hot, or is it just generally because the market collapsed and has now rebounded? Everything's looking positive.
Yeah, I mean, I think generally across the board, most industries within PR are showing a little bit of a resurgence, and it seems that most people that we're speaking to at the moment are doing quite well. But I would say particularly the corporate and B2B space didn't ever really kind of, well, I'm sure some companies did, but the majority of companies fared much better throughout 2020 than they probably thought they were going to. And so whilst they didn't hire, they probably could have done, and now it's kind of almost playing double catch up. And so those kind of sectors have really picked up. And so particularly if you're working in the kind of B2B and corporate space, as a candidate, you're very much in need and in demand.
A couple of questions about the balance between working in an office and remotely. What's remote? What are the opportunities for remote? How are companies looking at that?
Yeah, I think it's great, because I think what's happened, I think at the beginning of the pandemic, everyone thought that working from home was amazing and this super duper new world. And I think now most people have kind of realized that actually it's not all it cracked up to be every single day. But I think most candidates that I'm speaking to at the moment are wanting a little bit of a hybrid model, and most companies seem to be approaching that pretty well and taking on a bit more of a flexible approach to working, which is amazing. So I think what it does is it opens up the talent pool. Companies are typically no longer restricted by geographical location when they're looking at applicants, and similarly candidates aren't restricted to kind of having to relocate to London to sort of work for some of the bigger agencies. So I think if you're an employer and you can embrace flexible working and perhaps a sort of a bit of a hybrid model where people don't have to be in the office even kind of every week, then you'll massively open up your talent pool. But it's difficult because not everyone wants the same thing. Some people do want to be in an office environment all the time. So you can't be all things to all people. You've just got to kind of work out what works for you.
How about the balance between recruitment from agencies and recruitment from in-house?
Yeah, I think, well, I guess in-house is always, there's always this, I guess, more sporadic recruitment for any in-house team. It's not as regular as agencies, and I think that's still the case now. I think the majority of agencies, most agencies that I know are kind of open to seeing people at the moment at various different levels in-house. It's not always going to be the case, because I guess there's only a finite number of people you can have in an in-house team, regardless of how well the business is doing. So agencies seem to be hiring more frequently and more rapidly probably than in-house. But I do think that where perhaps there has been growth in certain companies, and also where comms has been such a sort of important part of most companies' strategy over the last year, I think a lot of people have found the need to bolster their teams, particularly in certain areas, certainly like around the sort of crisis piece and also internal comms as well. So those are kind of areas of growth.
Can I ask about inevitably the junior end of the market? So lots of organisations didn't hire at all last year, the junior end of the market, because of the challenge of onboarding, well, the interview process and then onboarding. How are you seeing that? And have you any tips for both employers and for recent grads that might be looking?
Yeah, I think I guess there's a hesitancy for employers to hire at entry level when we are still working remotely, because I suppose it is harder. There's an argument that it's harder to train when you're not sort of physically sat with somebody and you're not being able to get that face time. But I think it is about adapting, and there are so many really, really great grads out there who are so willing to learn, who are probably much better at using technology than certainly I am, but that probably a lot of us are, so can take the opportunity to learn remotely really well, and they've probably been learning remotely at university for the last year, so are very, very capable of doing that. So there's a lot of really great people to be hired. So from an employer perspective, I'd very much encourage them employers to look at that entry-level talent pool, because you're going to pick up some cracking candidates. If you're a candidate at entry level looking to get into the market, it probably is seeming a little bit difficult at the moment because of the kind of the focus on more senior hires. But particularly my one thing that I would say out of the tips that I just shared then for graduate and entry level candidates is about the PR in yourself kind of piece to kind of set yourself up and distinguish yourself within the market. I think it's really important to make sure you're making use of your social channels and your LinkedIn channels in the best possible way to kind of promote yourself, get yourself seen by the relevant people, write sort of blog posts that show that you're engaged in the industry, and that just kind of sets you apart a little bit, I think.
Alex, I don't know if you've seen the chat, but there's like 20 questions here.
I can go through them.
I can't get through them all, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to capture all these, and maybe you and I can have a conversation around these.
Yeah, no problem.
Maybe I'll write a blog post, if that's all right. But thank you very much for really good, insightful.
No worries. Sorry, I sped through it so quickly.
No, it's great. Really appreciate your time, and it's really encouraging to see the industry going back so strong. Thank you.
No worries.
Right, next up we have Bethanie Dennis. Beth's the head of content and digital at North, based up here in the Northeast in Newcastle. She curates a really thoughtful newsletter each week called theweeklypr.com. You might want to look that up. She's joining us today from Jarrow. She's going to talk about creativity and managing creativity on a deadline. Beth, hello.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. It's
You're
really
welcome.
nice to be here, and thank you for the little plug for my newsletter there. I appreciate that. Okay, are we all good to start?
Yeah, you could go.
Fabulous. So thanks for having me. It's really nice to be here. I'm Beth. I head up an agency called North. We are a creative digital PR, content and SEO agency working on clients such as HelloFresh, Money.co.uk and ATG. So today we're going to be exploring a bit about how to encourage a creative mindset when time is of the essence, or not of the essence rather. So we've all been there, we've all got deadlines, busy schedules, we've all had a meeting the next day that we're meant to have ideas for or problems solved, but we just don't have the time, and it creates a little bit of a panic. So I know creativity is quite personal to individuals and quite subjective, but I do believe, especially for me, that when creativity is under the gun, it usually ends up killed. So there was a study on this actually in 2002 from Harvard. They collected over 9,000 diary entries from 177 employees, and the employees logged how stressed they were, how time pressured they were, on a scale from 1 to 7. And they also logged how able they were to think and feel creative on any given day. And the results are really interesting. On the days rated a 7, so maximum time pressure, maximum stress, people were 45% less likely to think creatively than they were on any of the lower pressure days, which is very interesting. So I have a little formula for this, for encouraging creativity. So producing more ideas and better ideas as well. So I believe that mental space plus a brain trust, which I will go into in a little bit, equals creativity. So just a little explainer. So on mental space, I really believe that sometimes you need to slow down in order to actually speed up. So it does feel kind of counterintuitive when you are so stressed and you have deadlines, but I really, really believe that you need to slow down to speed up sometimes. And the Navy SEALs have a really good saying for this: slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So I live by this as well. So I want to talk about brainwaves, because brainwaves are really, really important when it comes to creativity. So the type of brainwaves we experience actually indicate how creative we are likely to be. So this goes from delta brainwaves, which is where you're fast asleep, not much going on, all the way to gamma. So just as an insight, myself and the other speakers are probably experiencing gamma brainwaves because we're presenting, we're keeping an eye on the time, we're trying to do this in 5 minutes. You as viewers are, I hope, experiencing better brainwaves, so you are learning and you're concentrating. But creativity actually happens between these alpha and theta brainwaves. So it's kind of the moment where you're just chilling and you're almost falling asleep, I suppose. That's where you get your inspiration and creativity happens. So quite a famous inventor was well known for this. He actually knew how to hack his own brainwaves to get his best ideas. So the trick that he did was he used to sit by the fire and he used to hold steel balls in his hands. This is Thomas Edison, by the way. He used to surround himself with metal plates and he used to almost drop off and fall asleep. But because he had these steel balls in his hands, he used to drop them just as he was falling asleep. And they used to make an almighty clatter on the floor and wake him up. And then he'd have something next to him where he could write down whatever he was thinking in that moment and remember it as he's just coming out of a nice little nap there. So the closer you are to producing these alpha theta waves, the more creative you will be. So I've got some really quick tips here that are free that will help you get to this stage when you're stressed. So this one is a huge one. This is such a biggie for me. Mute all distractions, and I mean all distractions. Phone on flight mode, laptop shut. Just have yourself a pen and paper or whatever works for you, and just get that space around you so you can be creative. Also, a change of scenery or space. Nobody wants to be in an office with a grey carpet and white walls when they're trying to be creative. Get yourself outside, wherever it suits you. Go and lie in the dark, if that's what you prefer. But you need a different scene to think of your best ideas, I believe. And walk in as well. So this one's really, really interesting because there was another study done by Stanford University in 2014. They studied about 200 students and how creative they were. They did tests on creativity and different types of thinking. And they found that creative ideas or creative output increased by 60% while walking, which is quite amazing, really. And it's interesting because they tested this on a treadmill and they also tested this with wheelchair users as well. So going out and, you know, having a change of scenery and getting out there for a walk. So if we go back to my little equation for creativity, mental space and a brain trust. So brain trust is really interesting, and I have totally swiped this from Pixar, which in my view is the pinnacle of creativity. So Pixar, they have a brain trust, which is a group of people, about 5 people, who are well trusted, and for each film it's a group of people who are not necessarily working on the film that come in every now and again to give their honest view, honest opinion on a film, and it just allows you to see things from another person's perspective, which I think is really cool. So if you are not a multi-billion-dollar world-dominating animation studio, it's really important that you can take this and adapt it to your situation. So collaborating across and beyond your organization. So when you are thinking of ideas, in our industry, it's sometimes called the pub test. So testing ideas on your friends at the pub, other people in your workplace as well, who they don't necessarily have to be creative. They could have a point of view. So for example, I experienced it this last year. We were doing a creative campaign for a slide and wardrobe company, and we created a bit of a fun PR stunt of a wardrobe for pets, and we were thinking of a name to call it, and we were in this kind of all service meeting for the client. We were struggling for a name. We had the woof drobe, the dog drobe, and then someone who wasn't a creative person just in the meeting. I think they were actually a PPC person. All of a sudden came out with this. Why don't you call it the wardrobe? And that is the face that I pulled as well, because we had been so kind of in it and concentrated on this project that we just couldn't see the bigger picture. And someone from an outsider perspective got it like that. And it was so frustrating, but it was really, really helpful to get outsider point of view. So that's it from me. I have some books that are relevant to each part of what I've talked about. So The Mental Space, a book called Indistractable by Nia El is, I really, really recommend that you get that, because I read that 18 months ago and I still use everything from it today. And also Creativity Inc. So Ed Catmull from Pixar, great stuff. Again, if you're creative or work in problem solving, I really, really, really recommend you take a look at these books. So that's everything from me. Thank you very much. I really welcome all of your questions.
Thanks, Beth. Beth, do you want to stop sharing your presentation? There you go.
Yeah.
Hello. Good to see you. Thanks for that. It's really thoughtful, considered presentation. So have you got any steel ball bearings in your hand?
No, I don't at the minute. No.
You tried that? Does it work?
My brain waves are up here. I'm gamma.
You often think in a creative agency that brainstorming is about sitting in a room and kicking around ideas. We haven't been able to do that over lockdown, you know, and you'd argue that it's probably not the best way of coming up with creative ideas anyway. What have you done at North to come up with ideas?
Yeah, it has been hard, because at a creative agency, one of the perks is you have a great team and you work together really closely and bounce ideas off each other. So the way my team works at the minute is we often all individually have a brainstorm by ourselves first, and then we come together. So obviously Zoom has been very helpful with that. But as restrictions have been lifted, we're quite a flexible workforce. So a couple of members of the team have been meeting up with each other, going for walks when it's been allowed. So that's been really nice. But yeah, it has been tricky. It has been tricky. Yeah.
Tell us about. So a couple of people have said about walking meetings, walking brainstorms. How does that work?
So it's quite simple. You just go for a walk with another person and bounce ideas off each other. There is kind of some interesting research in this. So to give honest feedback to each other, it's quite useful when you're walking alongside one another, because if you're not necessarily comfortable giving feedback that isn't necessarily positive, you're not kind of having to face that person and look them in the eyes, if that makes sense. So walking alongside each other, I think is really interesting. Yeah, we've had
so not only are we getting advice on creativity, we're getting advice on relationship management.
Yeah, relationship. I'm sure there's research. When you're in a car as well, conversations are usually more open because you don't have to face the person.
Yeah, any parent in the any parent that's watching will recognise that. It's certainly the time to have challenging conversations. As lockdown's released and we go back into offices, do you think we're going to continue to do you think we'll adapt how we come up with creative ideas, or will we carry forward what we've learned during lockdown?
Yeah, I think remote working is here to stay. I think it has to be. The whole world has completely changed. We've actually made our first fully remote hire this month. So it's going to be a bit of a learning curve for us as well, but we have great tech, we have a great group of inclusive people. So yeah, I think we're all going to have to learn and adapt, definitely.
Is there any particular pieces you talked about Zoom, any other pieces of technology that are useful to help with remote brainstorming?
Yeah, so on Google Meets, I'm not sure what it's called. It's kind of a whiteboard that you can use and that everyone can input the ideas on, and you can make it colourful and fun and engaging. So things like that. Also tech, we just got all the new Google Meet tech where the camera kind of moves around the room and isn't kind of in the corner of the room. So if you're a remote person, it kind of makes you feel more involved when you can see everyone and get turned to the right person.
Yeah, a couple of people have suggested mirror. You can you've got that whiteboarding now in Teams. Someone suggested, Mark suggested Miro as well. I've used Shukelbox as well, which is a brilliant tool. It's like Pinterest, but for collating content that spark ideas. Thank you very much, Beth. It was a really thoughtful, insightful presentation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for your time. Hopefully you can go and chill out now.
Yeah,
and
thanks for having
calm
me.
your brainwaves down.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right. See you later. Thanks. Bye. Right. Next up, we have Sophie Drake. Sophie's an account director at Story, one of the agencies I work with at WaddsCon. It's a B2B agency in Birmingham. We got to know each other at lockdown. Sophie is here to share her story about storytelling. Sophie, how are you? Sophie, I think you're on mute.
I found the mute button. Hey. Hi.
Hey, you're on mute.
I know, that was typical, wasn't it? But thank you for that. Hello.
Hello.
Are we all good?
The stage is yours. Go for it.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me, Wads. Hi, everyone. As was said, I'm Sophie. I'm an account director at Story. We're a Birmingham HQ'd team of corporate punks, as we like to call it. We believe in the power of stories to change the world. So from the kitchen table to the boardroom table, the town hall to Whitehall, and the bus to the balance sheet. We're all about stories, and that's at the heart of everything we do. As the clue's in the name, you won't be surprised to know that Wads has asked me to talk a little bit about storytelling today. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, savvy, slick marketeers and comms pros, but I really wanted to keep the message clear today because we all know the merit of stripping things back to basics. And in today's world, sometimes that's more important than ever. And I've only got 5 minutes, so I'll crack into the deck. So the definition and the kind of role of stories hasn't really changed a fat lot, but the stories that we tell and how we tell them has changed a great deal. More so in the last 12 months as a result of some of the things going on in the world, as well as the fact that the tools and everything that we have the tools in our arsenal have massively sort of expanded, whether it's free or paid, also the different channels and the means of telling stories. So with all of that stuff at our feet, it can seem like storytelling is this complicated thing, but really it's absolutely the simplest thing. So I think it's the most exciting time for us as storytellers. Why do I think that? Well, A, because stories are more human and more important than ever. We operate predominantly in the B2B world, but data from McKinsey and Forrester has highlighted that over 2/3 of business, B2B business decision makers are making their decisions emotionally. And at the same time, they want to be spoken to like people, like humans, rather than as business decision makers. So we know that the human element in B2B is definitely rising up the ranks. B, stories are more important because there's more sexy data. It's more exciting than ever because there's more tools for us to be able to tell those stories. And marrying the data with human is the kind of perfect end goal to create the stories that sing. And C, stories at the moment serve many, many different purposes. So from teaching people something to entertaining them and making them laugh, right through to actually inspiring change and giving them a call to action. They go away and actually do something off the back of the story. So I think, the key message here is working out which of those you're trying to do before you start telling a story is the ultimate number one priority. And we know in our experience of the last 12 months that creating those meaningful connections with humans, whether it is in the B2B or the B2C space, it's going to deliver the knock-on results for us as comms pros. It's going to drive the business benefit, making that human connection with the data. But unless you're Mondelez and you're trying to create your own word and focus more about the fact that they ended up calling their storytelling humaning and absolutely got slammed for it because they were focusing on more about marketing their marketing than actually doing the work. So that's where we are. So it's really simple, and I thought it'd be good to give you a couple of examples of how Story has done the storytelling stuff in the last 12 months. So EY, Big Four consultancy firm, they tasked us with sort of reaching mid-market businesses for them. They were struggling to get a bit of a hold and in touch with those marketers. So rather than speaking from EY's perspective, we looked at some of the real human challenges facing businesses, from family and owner managed businesses to little SMEs, right through to the big leaders heading up major organizations. And we spoke to them directly with some very simple content and a very simple message, and filmed some shoot at home videos last year and launched them in a really slick way, alongside some high impact thought leadership that brought those human stories to life with some data. At no point did we use any paid for data. We used desk research and got some really high impact stats that backed up all the points that were made in the videos by the business leaders themselves. Did it work? It absolutely did work. So not only did EY win work off the back of it, but they were able to kind of drive subscriptions to their content through the newsletters and the website. And they also saw 95% of those that actually engaged with the newsletter, they watched the full 20-minute episode series each time. So it was more about the fact that it was the quality rather than the quantity of those mid-market businesses that we got on board. Something a little bit more left field for us in the last 6 months was Boom Radio. So they're a new national radio station set up to engage the boomer generation and be a bit of a rival to the likes of BBC Radio 2. They brought us on board to help them launch that radio station. And we married the human stories with the data like this. So we got the faces and the people behind the radio station on board. We had a fairly low budget, so we had to be quite creative with it. So we leveraged the fact that we got some really nostalgic faces presenting those shows from home, and tapped into some of the pride and the love and the sort of the things that resonate the most with the boomer generation. At the same time, we did a heavy amount of desk research and found some amazing data from Ofcom, and also Boom Radio had its own small set of sample size data that we used to really lean into that topic of the boomers being a bit of a forgotten generation in the marketing and comms and media world. So we used that kind of mixture of the human and the data to kind of put the story together. And over the series of 3 months, we did a mix of media, high impact thought leadership and social content. And that really resonated with the boomers because listener figures were an absolute skyrocket compared to what was expected. They've actually gone fully national now and doubled down on their investment. And it's all about the fact that we're actually seeing a lot of feedback coming in from the boomer generation on social media about the fact they've heard or read about it, and they're now tuning into the station because it's answering a need that exists. So that's some of the examples. And in the spirit of stripping things back to basics and not just giving us the tools, how do we get the stories out of people? What we do at Story is strip it right back, ask the right questions and do the prep work. We can't iterate how important it is to do the prep work when it comes to storytelling. Knowing exactly what the end goal is, the purpose of the story you're trying to tell is, and then asking the right questions to get that answer. Similarly, just like the Boom Radio and the EY stuff, context and knowing the media and knowing what resonates. So we knew that there was a rhetoric in the press about the boomers being neglected. So we leaned into that because we understood the context. And then I'll bang on about it a couple more times, but that's story, human, data. It's having a mixture of all of those three and having that end goal. The pretty stuff, everyone knows video, imagery, hugely important. It's no longer a nice to have, it is definitely a necessity in telling stories. So, you know, Story's seen a massive uplift in our video production, and we will never put a story out without an image or an infographic to go alongside it. And finally, cut the crap, cut the shit. Bring your story right to the fore by cutting out jargon and bringing your work to life with the simple message. And finally, I'll just pick up on some of the tools that we use at Story. So Answer the Public, I'm sure you're all aware of it, but it's a free tool and a paid tool where you can start to see some of the trends and the themes emerging and that is being searched around certain topics. Likewise, I will never never not value the ability of free data. So just a few examples here. The ONS put out some reams and reams of data all the time that are very, very valuable. It might take a little bit of extra time, but it's free and it's there. Same with Google and the data in the search. You can access a lot of themes and trends through Google. And in the B2B space for us and as marketers in that sort of landscape, the economic development agencies and public bodies are also a really good source of information. So understanding the kind of economic impact of various sectors and the market activity has been a real area of opportunity for us, and one that we really find useful. And BuzzSumo as well is, in the increasing digital world, more vital than ever. We can understand where our competitors are at, where our clients' competitors are, and what they're talking about, and use that to shape creative ideas and creative campaigns. But I think I'll leave it there, and I hope I kept a little bit to time.
You're good. Do you want to close your deck down and come and say hello?
Cute.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you. That was good. Really thoughtful. Storytelling implies fiction, doesn't it? But how do you ensure you avoid misinformation and when working on behalf of a brand or an organization?
I think for Story, we have a couple of ways of doing that. So as I said, the fiction is only fiction when you can't back it up. So a lot of our work is involved in having a story, having a message, and then using the facts and the proof points to back it up. So whether that be secondary sources of information and data, or actually doing a bit of due diligence and understanding the potential risks a little bit, and doing a bit of a risk register. But misinformation in our space is quite limited. I think, you know, B2C slightly has a bit more of a challenge on that space, but, you know, it's all about getting the facts, double checking the facts, having a team that kind of double checks everything before it goes out. How
do you persuade an organization that maybe wants to talk about itself to engage in a wider narrative around a story? That's something I think every professional communicator is going to recognize, right?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, there is still merit and value in some of the traditional bread and butter announcements. You know, as a B2B agency, we're never going to escape a client wanting to talk about their new hires or their growth. But how we tell that story can be made very, very much more impactful if you back it up with case studies and you bring it to life, or you try and steer a client with some meaningful data. So a lot of our pitches, before we even actually get to the point of working with a client, have an element of proving why our ideas will resonate with a client and why they should steer that way rather than talk about themselves. I mean, EY is a prime example there, because rather than trying to align their services with the needs of the market, we made them synonymous with the challenges of the family owner managed business. And actually we put the compelling case to them, because, you know, we understand that marketers and decision makers want to be talked to about human things. They want to be talked to about the you know, as a person. So it's very much like making that compelling case and backing it up with data before we even present it to a client.
Sean True asked a question about the use of jargon in B2B. Should we promote clear and plain English in all comms, or can we get away with jargon?
Sean, I 100% agree with you. I think we are on cutting the bull. It is exactly why Story was set up, to do just that. And, you know, pushing back on clients as much as possible is definitely encouraged. But there are actually some tools out there in the market to actually, I'd take them with a pinch of caution, but there are tools where you can put some copy into a piece of online tool and it will strip out the jargon or highlight some of the jargon for you. But speaking in plain English and getting that simple message across is absolutely vital. So yeah. No doubt.
Hemingway is a great tool for that I'd recommend. A couple more questions. Yes. So Steve Earle, beyond engagement, how do you measure the success of a story?
Oh, good question. So obviously engagement, and for us that, you know, raising profile is coverage volume, coverage hits, etc. But for us in the case of Boom Radio, there was a lot of digital coverage that we secured. So the success of that campaign wasn't just about the volume and the profile, but we managed to get 30 odd backlinks in a few months that then drove direct traffic to Boom Radio's website, and people tuned into the show. So like during some of the TV coverage that we achieved, we actually could see an uptick in listener numbers on the station, for example. So that was quite an easy way of us measuring direct impact of PR. So trying to get access to your clients' back offices or data that kind of aligns with your timings. So we knew we had an announcement going out or a TV piece of coverage, and Boom Radio were very open to us knowing what the listener numbers were doing about that, or getting access to Google and their analytics to see whether or not there's peaks in traffic. But at the same time, I think it's understanding at the outset what the KPIs are for the campaign. So if it is just profile, great. If a client wants business leads, we have more ways of measuring that. So it might be, they might have specific targets that they're looking to win work from off the back of a piece of work. So we look at how we then follow up with the PR work on a new business kind of strategy with them. So it might be following the coverage landing or following a video going out. How do you then, as EY, go and approach that client, communicate it, maximize it, and then hopefully at the end there's a business result from it as well. So, but it really depends on the work, the story, and the client as to what the end goal and how we measure that is.
Sophie, thank you very much for a really thoughtful presentation. We've actually got a speaker next time round on creating a measurement framework. Walla Graham from Karma is going to join us, so she'll be a great build on that. Thank you very much for your session. There was a question from Asif, actually, asking what the tassels are behind you. I can fill in for that. That's so you're celebrating 30 under 30, being named 30 under, one of the 30 under 30 by PR Week. So
yes, I am.
You've had a big week. Congratulations. Finish with WaddsCon.
Thank you. Exactly.
What
a better way to end the Friday. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Right, our final speaker is David Gallagher. He's a former colleague. He's also president of Omnicom PR. His new book, co-written with John O'Brien, tells the story. I've got a copy here. Tells the story of corporate purpose and authentic marketing. David, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thank you, Wads. And thanks, Alex and Beth and Sophie. Those were like little 5-minute bundles of gold. I took frantic notes to try to keep up with you, but you managed to jam in a lot of value and a lot of generosity. And I hope you don't mind. I'd love to follow up with each of you on different parts of your presentation. A lot of great stuff. But so I did write a book with my friend and colleague John O'Brien, and we have done maybe a dozen or so conversations like this after it dropped in the UK at the beginning of the month, and just this week in the US. And I've learned a couple things about these conversations. One, nobody wants to see a PowerPoint summary of a 200-page book. Nobody, even if my own family doesn't want to see that. And nobody wants to hear a book report. I think what people do like is to hear what opportunities maybe we uncovered in the process of writing this book. And I've harvested 6 for you that I hope you will embrace at least one of them and see opportunities for you, for your business or the businesses you advise. And the first one is to simply stop the wash. I've called this book kind of the bastard child of fear and hope. My colleague, John, my co-author, John, ex-British infantry officer, he sees risk everywhere. He's a risk mitigator by training and by practice. And he's also one of the early pioneers of the concept of purpose, both personal purpose and business purpose. And what he saw just before the pandemic was a temptation by many respectable companies and brands to embrace something happening on the social horizon and try to attach their own brand values to it, probably with good intentions and often creatively executed. But often inconsistent with the realities of their business, and then shown quickly to be inconsistent with the way they actually manage themselves. So I think the first opportunity for those of us in the advisory business is to help our clients stop the wash, stop doing stupid things that are not consistent with how you actually behave and operate. So his view was that we needed to mitigate the risk. So he was the fear part of the equation. I'm actually on the hope side. I saw a number of organizations that that actually do a pretty good job of this, but it's because they're true to their internal sense of purpose and they solve a human truth. So my desire was to maybe pull a few examples from those who are doing it well. But if we do nothing else, let's try to stop the purpose washing temptation. Second thing is to help find the truth, and this helps you get past purpose washing. So our view, and I think this is an enormous opportunity for those of us on the consulting side of the business, is to help organizations scour the entire set of operations and make sure that whatever they're claiming to be true to them is actually true, and it needs to center around a human-based purpose. Purpose should never, ever sit in the marketing department, the comms department. It should never sit with your agency, all of which should be involved in helping you express it, articulate it, deliver it, but it shouldn't be where purpose is born or where your purpose stories are born. I didn't tell this story in the book, but one that has resonated in my own mind dates back a few years ago with a UK client that I had, a giant entertainment production business based here in the UK, that told me they had 25 different philanthropies, causes, organizations, or purposes that they tried to support. And they asked me, and Sophie, I didn't know you then, maybe you could have helped me with this, but they asked us to string together a story that would make it all make sense. I said no. I said, actually, I think what we need to do is find where the truth is and then build a story around what that truth is. They decided not to go with us for that particular assignment. But I think the opportunity for us as advisors is to help our clients understand what their purpose is and how it lives across the entire set of operations before we even begin to think about how we express that creatively. There's an opportunity for us to listen differently. And I noted with interest, I don't know Answer the Public. That sounds like a great new way to help understand what's happening. But what we find with clients that are on their own journey to develop a purposeful story, they're very good at understanding what we call their transactional audiences, the supply chain, the customer, the ultimate consumer. I think they have a pretty good idea of what those audiences, what those stakeholders' needs are, what their expectations are, and how they measure things. They even begin to understand a wider purposeful audience. And this we define as those who may not care about your organization, your cause, your product, but they share your same sense of purpose. You need to listen to them to understand the language that they use, the tone that they use, who influences them, who annoys them, so that you can begin to have a meaningful conversation with them, and so that your purpose stories can ring true. It's also complicated out there. So we acknowledge that there are peripheral audiences that may have nothing to do with your organization. They may have nothing to do with the purpose that you espouse, but they're capable of changing the conversation. And they can do that in a single news cycle. I think our job as advisors is to help our clients keep an ear to the ground for all three of these types of audiences so that your stories remain truthful, dynamic, and engaging. We've tried to give you a framework in the book, which we call PACA. It doesn't have to follow in that linear order, but it is centered around purpose. Every good purpose story has three elements to it. It has some comment on achievements, so things that you've done that speak to your journey, that are measurable, that are true, and that resonate with your various audiences. It has some element of commitment where you acknowledge that you're never actually going to reach the full conclusion of your purpose, or you probably won't. So you need to make some commitments for the future that are, again, measurable and demonstrable. And there needs to be some element of aspiration, some element of human emotion to it. And those aspirations should be built in concert with elements of your stakeholders that are maybe beyond your core audience. And we find and try to give some examples of PACA-based stories to tell. A fifth opportunity, and this gets beyond our role as comms advisors, PR people, or marketers, and that's to help our clients think beyond our immediate function. The moment is here for businesses to redefine themselves beyond delivering shareholder value. There's a couple of recent magazine pieces, some dating back to 2019, but the idea that business is being redefined, the Business Roundtable in the US said it has to go beyond shareholder value and speak to a wider set of stakeholders, is a significant opportunity for those of us who are truly committed to purpose-based marketing and communications. And it lets us have a different kind of conversation with our clients. And finally, and by the way, I should have said, I hope all of these opportunities speak to you, whether you like the book, read the book, you may not give a shit about the book, but I hope at least one of these opportunities speaks to you. And if you hear nothing else, there is a giant community of like-minded people around the world. They're already talking about these same concepts. They're already building on some of the tools and methodologies that we produced. When we launched the book just a few weeks ago, we thought it might be fun, and we knew we had to do it virtually anyway. It might be fun to do it on Clubhouse. And if you're not familiar with Clubhouse, I know there's a debate about it because it's right now only available on Mac. You can't have it on Android. It's invitation only. So there are some questions about the platform itself. But for us, it's a live, human-based, conversational, focused platform. And it seemed to resonate with the values we're trying to espouse in the book. And we thought if it fails, there aren't enough people on the platform to know about it in the first place. So we thought we'd give it a go. We had 3,000 people come to this virtual launch event, and it included CEOs, president of Time Magazine, the rapper MC Hammer stayed for the entire it was meant to be an hour, it went 3 hours. He stayed and basically recited his favorite chapters from the book. And I say this not to brag that I know MC Hammer now, but that there is a community that if you're not part of, you would be welcome to join. And it exists obviously far beyond Clubhouse. And hopefully maybe it exists in this community that Wads has so generously developed and the time of the speakers that he's so graciously found. Hopefully we can start a community that's similar. So I'm very happy to connect with you on Twitter, on Instagram, on Clubhouse, all under the same handle. And that is the end of my show. As they say on Clubhouse, I'm complete.
Very good. Thanks, David. We've got a couple of minutes for questions. So the purpose of a business is to create shareholder value. Discuss.
I think that definition is changing. I think that has been the model for the past 60 years, sort of the Keynesian Friedman model of business. But I think that definition is changing. So Jamie Dimon in 2019, the Business Roundtable issued a statement. A number of companies signed on to it, saying that it had to go beyond shareholders and include community, employees, the environment. And I think that that's probably the direction of travel for business. It's hard right now because there's not, one of the hardest parts of the book to write was how do you measure the impact of purposeful communications. So as you know, there's a lot of discussion about how you measure PR impact, how do you measure marketing impact, actually probably more choices than we need right now for that. But there's not a comprehensive score sheet or report card for activities beyond communications and marketing. So I think that's probably the next big hurdle for us. But I have no doubt that that's the direction of travel for business. So I would get beyond shareholder value.
Related question, what's the journey or plot for us, the journey, please, from CSR to purpose to ESG? How do they interrelate?
You know, I think the birth of this book actually started with John and I agreeing that we needed a glossary because so many terms were being used interchangeably, sometimes mistakenly, starting with philanthropy or cause-related marketing or CSR or ESG, and they're all parts of the puzzle. I know John personally was a big champion advocate of CSR for a long time, but his view was that it became the job of the few rather than the cause of the many. And his fear was that it had been kind of relegated to a department rather than a value spread across the organization. And that the sense of a redefinition of purpose would be a little more inclusive and beyond that. I think ESG is a marker. I think it's a reflection of some of the same attitude behind the Business Roundtable decision. And I think that we'll begin to see ESG scorecards as a reflection of value. Right now, I think people with money see it as a sign of good management, a good risk mitigation, and some sensitivity to the wider world around them. But I don't think it's a perfect scorecard yet, but it's definitely going to take on more strength and more resonance.
David, thank you. Thanks for such a great presentation. Your book, we can get that on Amazon?
You can, my book, yeah, you can get it on, it's on, Kogan Page is publisher, but it's available on Amazon.
Is that a copy of Tension Waddington behind you on the left as well?
Yes, I do have that as well.
Good man. David, thank you very much. Really appreciate you spending the time talking to us.
It was fun. Thanks.
Right. That's the that's a wrap. I just want to talk briefly about next month and what's coming next. So as we emerge from lockdown, if you're in the UK, in the UK nations, we're going to continue doing it as long as there's an audience and speakers willing to pitch. Next month for May, we've got 4 speakers. Fazan is going to talk about the changing relationship between agencies and clients and what that means for public relations practice. In all the feedback we've had for WaddsCon, we've had a lot of requests for comment on, for comment and advice on designing measurement comms measurement frameworks. So I've asked Orla Graham to come and talk from Karma. She's going to talk about AMIC frameworks and other things beside. Asif Chaudhry from We Are Resource, the comms hero himself, is going to talk about the renaissance of print. And I've been having a really interesting ongoing discussion on LinkedIn with an MBA student from the University of Ulster, Ursula, about public relations and whether it's ever going to be a profession. So that's the lineup for next month. You're going to receive a replay of the event today. You'll get a feedback form and a link to pitch for future events. That we'll probably send that out Tuesday. And it just leaves me to thank all the speakers for today's event, to thank you, the audience, and to say until next time, have a great long weekend. All the best.